Our presentation is about the Palmer Raids and the Red Scare by Noah Brenner.
A little louder, PJ.
So, what were the Palmer Raids and the Red Scare? The Palmer Raids were a series of arrests that took place during 1919 and 1920 that were based on like people that were thought of being communists in America, which kind of leads to the next point, which is like the Red Scare was the first time the threat of communism was introduced to the world, and people were like scared of that, and so they were like arresting people for no reason. We'll just play the video at the end.
So what was the May Day bombing? The May Day bombing was a bombing that it was part of the Bolshevik conspiracy where they put 36 bombs inside different mailboxes and it was the first kind of act of communism because it was led by a man who later became the first communist dictator of Russia, Vladimir Lenin, and one man was killed outside of A. Mitchell Palmer's house, who was the Attorney General, arresting all the communists.
So what amendments did these actions violate? We say that it violated the First Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and the Eighth Amendment. So these raids, they didn't allow people to have, when they were being like taken away for no reason, they didn't have the right to protest at all, and so which leads to the next point, which is the Fifth Amendment. Like people didn't have the right to a fair trial, which means that they were going to jail for no reason without any say. And it was the Eighth Amendment because the Attorney General was giving out cruel and unusual punishment by putting these people that had connections to Russia in jail, even if they had no connection at all to communism, and they were scared of it as well.
So what was prioritized rights and needs of a citizen? In this case, the needs of the government were prioritized. So the Attorney General was scared of the threat that was communism, and he was worried that if communism started to grow, it would change, and America would later become a communist country instead of a democracy. The idea was spreading throughout because of the media, putting it in all the newspapers and everything, which got into the minds of the American people.
So was the U.S. government justified in these actions? No, they were not, because they were arresting these people that had no connections to communism, and they were innocent, really, and they hadn't done, like, anything wrong, and they had just a small, like, they could have been, like, a really small connection to Russia, like, maybe they lived in America, and then they moved to Russia and then moved back, and they would still get arrested because they spent time, like, they lived there. So they were being arrested for no reason.
So how did the citizens view what was going on? So the citizens felt, other citizens, as including the Russian citizens, felt that it was unfair, illegal because there's no evidence of anybody doing anything illegal. It was also spread paranoia throughout other citizens that weren't Russian because they thought, well, if the government can put away all these Russians, then what would stop them from putting away any other group of people? But at the same time, the citizens also feared the fact that there's communism because communism had killed a lot of people at the May Day bombing.
So here's just our video.
The Russian Revolution.
The year is 1914. World War I had begun, and Russia was at war with Germany. The working class and the peasants make up the Russian army. However, they are not well equipped or trained for the battles to come. The year is now 1917. Millions of Russians had been either killed or wounded. The Russian people were angry at Tsar Nicholas II for getting Russia into a war, and several other reasons, including the Tsar taking personal command of the army, Rasputin's power over the royal family, food shortages, and growing political opposition. The first revolution came about in February 1917 on the Julian calendar. In Petrograd, which was the capital of Imperial Russia, demonstrators protested about the lack of bread due to rationing and were soon joined by striking workers. The army was called upon to suppress the uprising. Several protesters were shot and killed by the soldiers. However, many refused to open fire. The army, too, it seemed, had mutinied against the Tsar. The Petrograd Soviet was the city council for workers and soldiers. Now, more and more workers and soldiers elected people to it in order to represent their demands. The Tsar abdicated, bringing an end to the Tsarist autocracy, and a new government took over. This government was run by two political parties, the Petrograd Soviet and the Provisional Government. The Bolshevik Revolution. The Provisional Government was also unpopular. It made the decision to remain in the war and failed to give land to the peasants. Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks were a faction of the Marxist Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, and eventually became the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. He had a simple slogan which would appeal to the people and the Petrograd Soviet: peace, bread, and land. Peace, the end of Russia's involvement in World War I. Bread, solving food shortages. And land, which would go to the peasants. He also stated all power to the Soviets, meaning that he would seize power in the name of the Soviet. On November 6 and 7, 1917, or October 24 and 25 on the Julian calendar, the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, launched a coup d'etat against the Provisional Government. They stormed the Winter Palace and arrested the Provisional Government, putting themselves in charge of Russia's government. After the revolution, the Bolshevik government exited the war by signing a peace treaty with Germany called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. A civil war would erupt in 1918 by those who were against the new Bolshevik government, the White Army, and the Bolsheviks themselves, the Red Army. Subscribe to see more history videos.
Any questions, guys?
Yeah.
For Vladimir, did he, or what's his name?
Vladimir Lenin.
Was he like elected, or did he just like start like talking and then like people started to listen?
Yeah. Like, he was like kind of the head of the whole thing, and then like it happened.
So like he was like the influence for people.
Was the Mayday bombing in America?
Yeah,
Yes.
it was in America. And so one of the houses that got bombed was actually the Attorney General, which is one of the things that made it so scary for him.
So do you think that was what sparked his
Yeah.
personal
Yeah.
witch hunt?
That
That
was
was why he became anti-communist, because he was attacked by a somewhat communist act.
Do you know where in America the bombings like took place?
all over, I
I
think. And we don't know.
Probably the DC area.
Yeah. I have to look into that. All right.